Hello and welcome back to the Mystery Emporium. If you're new here, well, I'm going to read you a story. My stories are here to hopefully shock and awe you or just fill you with terror. So sit back, get comfy, grab your favorite snack, and enjoy. Facetious. The room is white. I wish it was red. Dream a dream and make them dead. Charlie sat on the floor of his room, rocking back and forth while staring at the wall. Every few moments, he'd repeat the same line and laugh maniacally. 3 years, 3 months, 18 days, 5 hours, 10 minutes, and 32. No! 33 seconds. One of the walls was a one-way mirror, and the men on the other side jotted down the time. The color is blue, Charlie. The voice pierced through the intercom, and Charlie rocked harder and said, The color is blue like the walls. Soon they will be red, and I'll scream with delight. Charlie laughed again and settled back down, seeming to ponder on something before his face locked in place, and he said in a tone of a robot, Go to the place where the angels reside and follow the signs. You'll know what you're looking for. He slumped back down after saying this and said, The room is white. I wish it was red. Dream a dream and make them dead. His laughter pierced through the silence as the viewers left the room. Lazure enters Mr. Krill's office and begins to say, The moment in time Charlie speaks of is the asteroid of August 9th, 2017, in Los Angeles, California. Mr. Krill strokes his cane and looks at the files Lazure laid out in front of him as Lazure continues. The asteroid landed in Miss Hartfield's backyard. Her daughter, Molly, ended up with various masses all over her body. Lazure lays pictures of the girl with bumps roughly the size of baseballs all over her body. After about 2 weeks, the bumps randomly disappeared. Later that night, the mother was mutilated and the daughter was nowhere to be found. Mr. Krill sat back in his chair, seeming to ponder on this before saying, Do you think the asteroid is one of the artifacts? I believe so. If not, then it's just coincidence, Lazure said before starting to pick back up the file. We shall go and observe this family. If we think this has to do with one of the artifacts, we will intervene and take them into our custody. Mr. Krill rapped his cane on the ground and stood up. Have you ever been trained on the chronosphere before? He said questioningly to Lazure. I've read about it in the files, but I've never used it. Mr. Krill smiled his devilish smile and said, Well, I promise it'll be one hell of a treat for you. Mr. Krill and Lazure entered the room housing the chronosphere and stood around it. Mr. Krill messed with the various dials and buttons on the device and showed the date and time they were looking for. Before I press this button, make sure all your body parts are inside the square on the ground. Anything outside of it, and you'll lose it somewhere in time. Lazure quickly shrunk himself inside of the square as Mr. Krill began to press the button. We should end up in this exact place and time 2 years ago. We should be safe. I can't really remember what was going on 2 years ago. Lazure stared at him questioningly as Mr. Krill laughed. I promise it'll actually be okay. I set up this room back at the start point for the chronosphere. Start point? Lazure said questioningly. July 13th, 1986. It's the year this artifact was willed into existence. But enough about that. Are you ready? Lazure nodded, and Mr. Krill hit the button. Both were enveloped by a blinding white light as they suddenly appeared in the same exact room. Lazure quickly fell to his knees and emptied the contents of his stomach. The first time is always difficult. Also, make sure you don't interact with anyone unless it's necessary. We are already going to cause a loop in time by doing this. Both watched the mother and daughter carefully over the next week and a half. both waiting and watching to see if the asteroid was indeed an artifact necessary for the collection. They watched as the girl practically grew overnight and started growing the various masses over her body. When the mom took the girl to the hospital, they took it as an opportunity to bug the house. "If you see the asteroid, don't touch it with your bare hands. I do believe it has supernatural properties about it," Mr. Krill said while setting up the cameras in the girl's room. After searching through the girl's room, they found the asteroid in her backpack. "I wouldn't take it yet. Remember that the masses disappeared when she separated from it," Lazure said as Mr. Krill inspected the asteroid in the bag. "I do believe you're right. The girl returns home tomorrow. We'll watch the cameras and see what happens." They sat outside in a van down the street and watched the mom and daughter return from the hospital. The girl looked perfectly fine and was dancing as she ran up to the door. The mother was laughing and saying something about how she'd make the girl's favorite meal for dinner that night. When the girl returned to her room later that night, the fun began. At first, she ignored the bag as she played with her dolls and decided to start getting ready for bed. She left the room for roughly 15 minutes to take a shower, and Lazure noticed that the bag started to glow. The girl returned to the room and was encapsulated with the light across the room. She made her way over to the bag and pulled the asteroid out. The change happened almost immediately. There wasn't any audio, but the two could tell her bones were snapping as her body twisted into various shapes. Her head snapped back and hit her back, and both looked on in terror as the skin seemed to tear apart at her neck. Blood splattered the wall behind her as her chest ripped open and her ribs fell out onto the floor. A long arm slowly creeped out of her chest cavity and started to rip the rest of her skin off. The creature before them stood roughly 10 feet tall, hunched over in the corner. They didn't need audio to hear the blood-curdling scream that the creature emanated. They watched as the mother quickly burst into the room and started cowering in fear. When she noticed the remains of her daughter on the floor, she began to scream and run. Mr. Krill gets out of the van and begins to walk up to the door. When he's on the porch, he adjusts his tie and grips his cane tighter before he begins to reach the door. Before he can knock, the door swings open and the mother is standing there staring at him. She's quickly pulled to the ground and screams for help from Mr. Krill. Mr. Krill grips his cane tighter and smiles as she turns around to swat at the creature that has sunk its teeth into her leg. "You'll never hurt me again, Mommy," the creature yells, before jumping up and ripping the mother's face off. Mr. Krill watches as the creature slowly devours the mother, starting first with crushing her bones and yanking out her insides. The creature is chewing on her intestines when it seems to finally notice Mr. Krill. "Can I eat you next, mister?" the creature says with wonder in its face. Mr. Krill smiles and points his cane at the creature and says, "No, sweet child, but I do want you to come with me. Where we are going, there'll be plenty of people for you to eat." The creature follows Mr. Krill to the back of the van, and it is injected with a serum to knock it out. "We need to drop her off in the van at the exhibition, and then we need to wait. She doesn't belong in our time yet." When the pair arrive at the exhibition, Lazure says, "Are we going back now?" Mr. Krill goes into the chronosphere room and puts the device back before saying, "No, we have one more thing we have to do here. It can only happen tonight if we want to avoid a rip in the timeline." Lazure looks at him with worry as Mr. Krill shuts the door and doesn't lock it. "Shouldn't you lock that, sir?" says Lazure questioningly. "Heavens no. It needs to be stolen today. I remembered this day specifically in our time. When we get it back, we can return home. For now, we need to not run into our past selves. You aren't hired yet, which is good, because I need you to officially meet me after it's stolen. They holed up in a hotel for a few days before returning to the exhibition one night. The creature from the other day was holed up nicely in its cage staring at him. "Aren't you ever worried about any of them getting out and seeking revenge?" Lazure said while inspecting the cage. "Heavens, yes. It's something I think about every single day. Now, let's see if the bait was taken." Mr. Krill throws open the door to the chronosphere room, and the device is nowhere to be seen. "Sir, shouldn't we worry that it's gone?" Mr. Krill laughed before saying, "No, my dear boy. Without it going missing, we'd never have our greatest attraction." In the present day, Charlie sits on the floor rocking back and forth. "The room is white. I wish it were red. Dream a dream and make them dead." He laughs maniacally before saying one more thing. "Your time is coming, master. You may not know it, but you made a mistake." Charlie laughs harder than before and falls to his side. 600 miles away, a car starts making its way closer to the exhibition. Hell is coming. Hell has come. Thank you for joining me today. Did today's story shock you? Wow you? I don't know. What did it do to you? Tell me. I want to know. Join me again next week where I will tell you another story. But I need your help. Give me a word. Any word. One word. And I will find the perfect story for you. If you've enjoyed this story today, please remember to like, subscribe, and share amongst your friends. Bring everybody to the Mystery Emporium. But be careful, because you may be next.